In this video, I will present a line graph from IELTS Academic 18 and walk you through these steps to write a good answer for it. Alright, let's begin. So the first step is always to spend some time on the statement to understand it and make sure you know the time of the graph. So this one is about the percentage of the population in 4 Asian countries living in cities from 1970 to 2020 with predictions for 2030 and 2040. So we have two tenses here, one about the past, 1970 to 2020, and one about the future, 2030 and 2040. It's very important to understand this, otherwise you will use wrong tenses. The instruction is always the same in writing task 1. We should summarize the information so we cannot report every single point. How? By selecting and reporting the main features only and make comparisons where relevant. In doing so, we should write at least 150 to be able to cover all the main features. Alright, that's step 1. Now, step 2, we should also spend some time on the data, on the graph, to understand it and plan. By planning, I mean we need to choose what points we're going to write in our overview and 1 point in paragraph 1 and in paragraph 2. So we can pause the video if you like to spend some time on it to understand it. Alright, let's begin. So in this line graph, we have percentage of the population living in cities. We have the year from 1970 to 2040 and also percentages from 0 to 90. 4 countries that mentioned in the statement are the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. In order to understand the data, we simply say up and down. Don't be obsessed with vocabulary at this stage. So Philippines went up, Malaysia up, Thailand up, and Indonesia up. So it's quite clear that all of them went up, and also in the future they're predicted to go up as well. So it's also important to group the data, those that are similar and those that are different. So what countries can we group here together? Which ones are similar? So if you set Malaysia and Indonesia as one group and the Philippines and Thailand as another, you're completely right. Because here we have Indonesia from almost 11 to 12 to around 60, a big jump. And also Malaysia from around 30 to around 80, 85, big changes. But Philippines and Thailand did not go up that much. So we can put Malaysia and Indonesia in one group and the Philippines and Thailand in another. In order to write the first body paragraph and the second one, we need to also choose the points we're going to mention, right? So we start with the most important changes and then with the least. I will start with Malaysia and Indonesia because they had and also will have big changes, and then the Philippines and Thailand in the second paragraph. Now we get to the writing stage. The first thing to do is to paraphrase the statement. We can again pause the video and paraphrase it, but I've done this for you so we can read it together. The chart illustrates the proportions of urban residents in 4 Asian countries over 50 years, along with the projections for 2030 and 2040. Can you notice the changes I've made? Alright, so I changed graph to chart. I deleted below because there is nothing below my writing. Instead of gives information about, I used illustrates. The percentage of, I used the proportions of. And the population living in cities, I used urban residents. In 4 Asian countries, I kept the same. And instead of 1970 to 2020, I used 50 years. And with predictions, I used along with the projections. And for the last part, for 2030 and 2050, I didn't change it. Remember, it's absolutely fine to repeat some of the words from the statement. There is nothing wrong with that. Alright, here's the answer I've written for this graph. You can pause and read, and then I will analyze each sentence of it. So, the first part, after the paraphrase, I've written the overview. Let's read it together. Overall, all 4 countries experienced a consistent upward trend in urban population percentages from 1970 to 2020 and are forecast to increase significantly by the end of the period. So I identified the main trends and I didn't mention any specific numbers. By numbers, I mean from 10% to 20% and so on. We don't write numbers in the overview. So like I said, I start with Malaysia and Indonesia because they had and will have the most significant changes. So I start with Malaysia. From 1970 to 2020, Malaysia and Indonesia saw remarkable increases in their urban population percentages from 30% to 75% and about 12% to 50% respectively. Remember, when you describe changes, you have to refer to the chart and use numbers. And here the numbers are not exact, so I used about, approximately, around, and so on. So in the first part of this paragraph, I described the changes till 2020, and now I will continue with the future part of it. Now, the language I used is different in this part. Moreover, estimations indicate further growth for these countries, with numbers climbing to around 82% and 60% for Malaysia and Indonesia, respectively. So pay close attention to the tenses. In the first part of the paragraph, I described the first part, I used past tenses, and in the second part, I used the language to show predictions for the future. Now it's time to get to the second part, the Philippines and Thailand. So again, quite similar to the previous one, I start with 1970 to 2020, and then we'll continue with the future part. But if you look closely, you will notice that between 1970 to 1990, we had an increase, but then we had a slight decrease to 2010. So it's something worth mentioning. I will mention that as well, and then we'll talk about the future part. The Philippines' urban population rose from about 31% to 48% between 1970 and 1990. Although there was a slight decrease to around 42% in 2010, it has since continued to grow and is anticipated to peak at about 55% in 2040. So I both mentioned the first part and the change and then future projection. Now it's time to get to Thailand. Similarly, Thailand went up in 2020 compared to 1970, with numbers rising to about 30% from 19%. Now it's time to talk about its future part. The country's urban population is estimated to surge with a rise to approximately 49% in 2040. So to recap, I chose Malaysia and Indonesia because they were quite similar. And also I grouped the Philippines and Thailand together for their similarities. And I started with Malaysia and Indonesia to have a logical flow, and then continued with the Philippines and Thailand. I used 3 paragraphs of the same size. Don't write just one line as a paragraph. It's not a paragraph, it's just a line. So 3 paragraphs like this would be a good choice that are well connected and coherent. Now let's talk about its cohesion. What gives cohesion to this writing? So first, I try to use synonyms. Here I've got some examples. For proportions, I use percentages. For experienced, I use saw. For estimations, I use projections. And for rose, I use increased. And for surge, I use rise. I also use some pronouns, these, they, it, the country. Some transitional words like moreover, meanwhile, although, similarly. I repeated some terms, terms of the same topic, like urban population, percentages, country names. I used the chronological order here. I started from 1970, then 1990, 2010, 22, and then 40, which is a logical flow. And also I used some projections and estimations like further growth, rise, surge, and peak, and also some connective phrases like overall and respectively. Now let's look at the language of change I use in this sample. The first part experienced a consistent upward trend, increased significantly, saw remarkable increases, further growth, climbing to, rose, a slight decrease, continued to grow, peak at, went up, rising, to surge, and with a rise. And also I used some words to show predictions like or forecast, estimations, is anticipated, and is estimated. In terms of grammar, sentences here are mostly compound and complex. So in the first paragraph, we have 2 compound sentences that are connected with conjunctions along with and. In the second one, We also have compound sentences and one complex sentence in this part with a main clause and a dependent clause. And in the third paragraph, also we have compound sentences and complex sentences. Here we have a compound one, and this one is a complex one. We have a main clause here and then a dependent clause. The same thing is true for the last one. Here we have a main clause and then a dependent clause. Alright, I hope you found it useful. Give it a thumbs up if you like the video and the content. I will try to write more samples and make more videos for writing task 1. Have a nice day.